Okay, for the second video, we're going to talk about the clip meter, which I probably should have went into a little bit more depth in the last video, but we're going to cover it. And we're also going to look at the configuring the audio master tracks. So one of the things that the book is wanting you to do, and it's talking about your timeline. This here little wrench is for your settings. So you have one of these in pretty much each of your panels. As you can see up here in your program, you have one, and that allows you to customize the shortcut tools that you're seeing. So for this purposes, we're going to actually look at this one here. When you open it up, we're going to adjust the audio headers. So when we choose that, it gives me a button editor. If you have not seen one of these before, the book is talking about this here track meter icon, and we're going to add it to our audio A1 track, and it's going to allow you to see the meter in another place, and it's going to be focused. You just drag it to here, and there it is. But this here one that you're seeing here, this is also a meter, and this is collectively for all your audio tracks, and we will use this when you're editing audio. However, this one that I just added here is specific to the A1 track. So you can add them to other tracks as well, and you can see how they affect as when you play. So I'm going to say OK. And notice it actually changed it from just one little icon to a bar, very similar to the one you see here. If for some reason you cannot see the full bar, if you drag this out slightly, you'll be able to see it. And now you have your own track meter on there. So as I continue to sample these things and I have to play audio, there may be a little bit of feedback in the videos. So I may try to mute the audio depending on if we need it or not. For this time, when I'll stop talking, I'll play this video, and that way you can see what this meter is going to do.
Excuse me. Is this seat taken?
Okay, so as you can see, hopefully that audio fed back through my microphone and picked up great for you guys. But as you're seeing the gentleman talk and says, excuse me, is the seat taken, the bar right here actually moved, and you were able to see where his levels were hitting in addition to over here. So you have two different places you can look. This here one's going to collectively take in all your audio tracks. So if you had music or sound effects on A2 or A3, it would give you a collective total of volume, versus where this one's going to be showing you just what's on A1. And like I said, you could put them on A2 and A3 and so forth if you want to see those. So that is your meter as far as audio sounds, and we'll talk a little bit more about what levels we need. All right, so the next thing the book is talking about is configuring the audio master track. And this is something you can do when you are making a new sequence. So this is your project panel. It's in a little different spot than it normally is. You click here and you go to sequence, and we now see this panel that you normally get when you're starting a new project. So you can come in and pick whatever video that you need. If you need DNX HD or HDV, any of these that you can choose. We'll just go ahead for this purpose. I'm going to pick 1080p, and we'll choose this one. Okay, so once you have a sequence chose and you have the settings that you like, in here you can come to the settings tab, and now you can see there's audio in here as well, and you can come to tracks. So here in the book it's talking about the different tracks. At this point, if you know you're setting up for a bigger project, you can add tracks and you can subtract tracks. Also, the book is talking about the mix that you're seeing. Defaultly, when you're making a new sequence, it's going to set you up for stereo. And stereo means left and right sides. So there's two tracks, and that's your default option. Depending on what clients need, there are these other options that you can look at. 5.1 is you can kind of think of it as like your stereo surround sound system, where it's going to choose middle, front, left, front right, rear left, rear right, and low frequencies. But basically, if you were setting up like a subwoofer and other speakers in your house, this might be a good way to export it, because certain tones and certain pieces will play in different spots, giving you that more immersive feel. But of course, a lot of times when we're delivering stuff, we're just working in stereo. Also notice that like the 6th channel has froze out, because that's what 5.1 is. That's the most that you can have. When we go back to stereo, you see you only have 2 channels. And then multi-channel will give you a whole lot to choose from, all the way down to 32 channels. That's a lot of audio channels. So multi-channel gives you a lot of channels to pick from. And then mono is the opposite of stereo, where stereo is 2, mono is 1 single track. Sometimes when you're recording in a camera and you have an XLR cable with like a microphone ran to the camera, that's only going to record on the left or right channel, giving you a mono line. And there is a cheat that you can do in your effects. You can fill left or fill right, and that can give you the effect of stereo, especially if they're pretty quiet. So that's something that you can get into with your effects, and we'll talk more about that. But this is if you're making a new sequence and your client wanted you to choose one of these other options, they are there for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and close the new sequence stuff. We just checked out all that, and we're going to get back into our audio meter a little bit more. So this guy over here, when you right click it, you have dynamic peaks and static peaks, and that's basically showing you marks. When you play through your timeline, it's going to maintain. If you choose the static one, it'll leave a little line wherever the loudest point is on your audio. Sometimes that's useful because you need to figure out what the loudest piece is. But a lot of times you just have it on dynamic. You can kind of see that's where we were originally, and it just shows you where the levels are at a glance, and then they're gone shortly after it's played. So you can choose either one of these. You also have options to choose your range. As you can see right now, it's at 60. So if I click off of that, you can see that our meter only goes to -60. You can pick other ones, but leaving it right where it is, I think that's a perfectly fine default option. So the other thing that you can look at here was the static and dynamic. Solo in place. Okay, so you can also, when I mentioned we have the meters over here on the left, you have these S's here as well. So if I choose to click solo here, A1 would be reflected as the only one in this meter. So that's how it's talking about doing solos. You could choose A2 or A3, whichever one that you need. When you unclick that, it goes back to assessing all of your audio tracks instead of just one. And then there's also certain levels that are standard as far as which decibel that you should be hitting when you are outputting sources. Okay, so I mentioned there are a set number that you should strive for when you're mixing audio. When people are talking, based on a quick internet search, because I couldn't remember for sure which we want, it's saying -6 to -12 is kind of the sweet spot. At this point, when this bar goes up, you notice part of it's green. When it gets to this area, it's going to be in the yellow. And then, of course, when it hits to 0, it's red. And the reason you don't want it to hit to 0 is because it's too loud. It's hit the top of your ceiling. And I know it's an imaginary ceiling, but just think about a bouncy ball. When it hits all the way to the top, it no longer can make a fancy, pretty waveform where it goes up and down, nice and fluid. And you can see that we have some waveform here. and none of them are hitting the top. If it did, when it gets to the top, it basically becomes flat and you lose part of the tone. So you don't want stuff to be hitting all the way at 0. So -6, -12, this is kind of the mixing range where you want your stuff to be when you finalize it. One of the other things, of course, if your audio is low, like it was recorded soft, and your loudest character is only -24, it may not benefit you to try to raise everything to -12 or -6 because you'll be adding a lot of ambient noise. You may want to decide everybody needs to be at -24 or -30, so each character is at the same volume. Because what happens if character A is -12 but character B is -30? You'll be sitting there with your remote at home and you're like raising it up to hear character B talking, but then when you hear character A, you're like, oh, I gotta turn it back down, it's too loud. So that's why it's important that both people be talking at the same volume level, and that's part of the mixing the audio stuff. So the audio meter can be your friend as far as seeing how to adjust this. And I know we're talking a lot about actually the pieces and components to it before we actually do it, but I'm trying to give you guys a solid foundation to understand where these pieces are and how to look for them. In the next video, we're going to start actually viewing some samples.